We've all been there at least once. Low on funds, but high on needs. Most of us accept this fact and wait until next payday. But others can't control their wants and desires and decide to do the only logical thing. Rob a bank. These next 10 people are just such people. They all decided to rob a bank and it went terribly wrong. Please make sure all beverages are safely stowed away and you are in a seated position because it's time to meet some of the people at the very bottom of the list of most successful bank robbers. Number 1, Macaroni Bandit. We start off our list in North Carolina with Mark Anthony, carpenter, aged 44. Mark was in a rush to get his hands on cash, and he didn't have much lying around to help him get some either. All he had was what little furniture surrounded him and a box of mac and cheese in the cupboards. That is when it dawned on Mark that he should rob a bank. Mark grabbed his box of Kraft macaroni and headed to the nearest bank. Once inside, he pulled out his mac and cheese and demanded the money. If the teller refused, he was going to detonate his bomb. The tellers refused to give him any money, and since he didn't really have a bomb, he ran out of that bank faster than you can say Easy Mac. He fled to a nearby city where officers spotted him in the woods. Just like Bigfoot, he didn't want to be spotted, so he tried running from the police. But, unlike Bigfoot, he was quickly apprehended and charged with attempted robbery. Sounds like the ultimate waste of mac and cheese to me. Number 2, catnap burglar. This next one is definitely on the running for the heist of the century. Eric Miller, age 35, was enjoying himself thoroughly. He had been drinking all night, and now it was time to re-up his cash supply. So he walked up to a bank in Missouri. At 3:12 a.m., security cameras caught him climbing through a bank window. Once he was inside, somehow without setting off any alarms, he proceeded to pass out on the floor. And that is exactly where he stayed for the next almost 3 hours. At 6:03 a.m., cameras watched him wake up, stumble around, and then kick out a window. This triggered the bank alarm, but Miller didn't seem to mind. He continued to stumble around for some time before crawling out the window he had just shattered. He left with no money, completely empty-handed. Actually, worse than that, he left his cell phone behind and also plenty of blood to run some DNA checks on. With all this extra help, he was quickly apprehended and charged with second-degree burglary. But he didn't really take anything. He left empty-handed, remember? So how can he be charged with stealing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Should this drunken burglar be charged, or should he just get a slap on the wrist? Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're down there, please, and make sure that bell is ringing loud and clear. Number 3, plunging to new lows. A 49-year-old man walks into a bank with a plunger. This sounds like the beginning of a hilarious joke, right? Well, it kind of is. Because a New York man decided he was going to try robbing some banks, and by the sounds of it, his bright idea came to him while he was dropping off a load in the bathroom. He grabbed his plunger and headed to the banks. Yes, you heard that right. Banks, plural. Because after walking into one bank, yelling obscenities to the tellers and demanding cash, he ran and decided he was going to give it a go, not once more, but twice more. Officers received calls about all 3 banks, and after a short foot chase, the unnamed man was apprehended and charged with attempted third-degree burglary. His plunger was found located inside a Citizen bank. No word on whether or not the unnamed man had cleaned the plunger first, but for everyone's sake who was involved, I'm really hoping it was clean. How shitty would that have been? Number 4, Apple Lie. Wherever he is right now, the Hamburglar is shaking his head in disbelief and shame after hearing about this next criminal. Daniel Hegwood was about to bite into a tasty apple pie he had just purchased at his local Sacramento McDonald's. Then he had the bright idea to shove it back in the bag and go straight to the bank. Hegwood held up the paper bag and demanded a hefty amount of cash, saying if he didn't receive it, he would detonate his bomb. After receiving his hefty amount of cash, he ran off. Officers quickly tracked him down, but he wasn't about to give up that easy. He told officers he was going to detonate his backpack this time. Apparently, he's got bombs everywhere. Bomb squad was called in because you can never be too careful when it comes to dumb criminals. Eventually, the pies were recovered and the man was taken into custody. Officer Laura Peck said, "Certainly, in this day and age, you have to take every threat seriously. But in hindsight, knowing the bag contained apple pies, it gives us insight into the lack of sophistication in his methods." She concluded with saying that clearly he's not that good at bank robbery. Wow, you don't say. Number 5, Dirty Bubble. For this one, we need to take a quick time travel trip back to the 1950s. 1956 to be exact. We find ourselves in Detroit with Raymond Siebert, a 16-year-old with a will to become the next dumbest criminal. Raymond walked into the bank while the teller was in the middle of counting her money. Remember, this was before the big computers kept track of all the finances. Raymond was complaining to her about a 50-cent service fee that he found preposterous. He handed her his bill and she walked away with it to have a look. That was when Raymond made his move. He spit the gum out of his mouth and placed it on a long stick. He then stuck his stick through the window and stuck it onto the money the teller had paused counting. When the teller came back, Raymond was gone, but his bank statement was still in her hands, and her cash stash was mysteriously $500 short. It took almost no time at all for police to find Raymond, and when the FBI raided his house, they found the missing cash. Raymond was young, but he was one of the first for sure, bravely paving the way for generations of dumb criminals to follow along in his footsteps. Because we all know, dumb criminals never learn. Number 6. Oops, I forgot the eyes. Halloween came early for our next robber. 47-year-old Matthew Davies from Scotland decided he was going to not only rob a bank, but also try out his Halloween costume in the process. Apparently, Matthew had never watched Charlie Brown, or he would have understood the basics of cutting eye holes. Matthew entered into the Bank of Scotland, located in Fife. In his hand was a pillowcase. Inside that pillowcase was a meat cleaver. After entering the bank, Matthew pulled the meat cleaver out of the pillowcase and proceeded to place the case over his head. To hide his identity. Well, one problem. My man forgot that in order to see anything, you must cut eye holes in the fabric so you can see through it. After he realized he wouldn't get anywhere not being able to see, and with the pillowcase on his head, he decided the pillowcase must come off. He then demanded £2,000, and when he only received $300, he began beating the partition glass between him and the tellers, until they gave him more. He then ran off into the sunset. That is, until a lead came that led them straight to Matthew. In his home, they found a meat cleaver and a pillowcase that was consistent with what he had put over his head. And, just for good measures, he also had a stun gun. Matthew was taken into custody and charged for all of his lunacy. Number 7, DriveThru Robbery. With the state of the world coming down with the sickness, a lot of things changed. Wearing a mask in a social setting was the new norm for a while. Most lobbies were closed, and only their drive-thrus were open for business. In Albuquerque in December 2020, Daniel Hansen found out that being a bank robber was going to be a bit different thanks to these changes. For starters, when he first walked into the bank to rob the place, he was quickly told that the lobby was closed. All business was to be conducted through the drive-thru window. No problem. Matthew wasn't about to give up now. So he walked around the building straight up to the teller's window. She passed him a deposit slip and a pen upon which he demanded the cash. The tellers were not stupid and immediately pushed their silent alarm, and they refused to hand him any of the money. Matthew ran to his car and fled the scene. Not much time had gone by, and it seems Matthew was out of luck. Officers had arrested him for an unrelated crime, and then they connected him to the walk-up robbery. But hey, A for effort, this guy is apparently not a quitter. Number 8, out of business. When planning on robbing a bank, one important step is making sure you're actually planning to rob a bank. One unnamed man from Germany thought his time had finally come. He had planned his robbery with such precise details, and when the day came, he never hesitated. This man marched straight into the bank with his plastic toy gun and immediately took a hostage and demanded 10,000 euros, the equivalent to $13,500. That was when he realized he had one crucial flaw in his plan. You see, the bank he was trying to rob, well, it wasn't a bank. It hadn't been a bank for 17 years, and more recently, it had been converted to a physiotherapy clinic. Since it wasn't a bank anymore, he let the hostage go and then moved on to Plan B. Plan B was to stand by an ATM and force passers-by to withdraw the ATM max of 400 euros, or $550. When he had had enough of that, he stole a car and left the crime scene. Thanks to another flaw in his plan, he was quickly caught. See, when he abandoned the car he stole, he left behind his toy gun, fingerprints and all. He was arrested and now has 7 years in jail to think up his next big heist. Number 9, picture perfect. Paul Stolf, 37 years old, was just ready to have the money he felt he deserved. He had worked hard his adult life, and now it was time to live in the lap of luxury. So he walked into a Wake Forest bank in North Carolina and robbed the place. With his new cash supply, he went straight to New Orleans and booked a room in the Sheraton New Orleans Hotel, which appropriately has the slogan, "Work, play, or simply relax at our New Orleans hotel," centrally located within an atmosphere of endless excitement. Paul had had enough excitement after robbing that bank, and he definitely needed some R&R. And that is where police found him. Quite easy, too, because Paul had so nicely taken one of the best surveillance photos ever. No disguise, and it was almost good enough to be his new Facebook profile picture. Now, Paul is staying at the Orleans Parish Prison, which I've heard only has 2 stars on Yelp. Yikes. Number 10. Could you hold this? For this guy's sake, he is lucky he was kept anonymous, because he might just be the world's dumbest bank robber. It was October in London, and this man wanted to try his version of trick-or-treating. It was called robbing a bank. He charged in wearing sunglasses and a flat cap and demanded £700,000 from the teller while waving his gun around. He then handed the teller a bag to put all the money in, but instead of actually handing her the bag, he handed her his gun. Gun in hand, the teller slowly backed up and activated the bank's alarm system. The man fled and has not yet been located. While armed and dangerous, he can presumably be disarmed with the words, "Please" and "Thank you." That's all the time we have for this video, but no worries, there are more bank robbers and bungling burglar videos for you to watch right here. And also, why haven't you subscribed yet? Yes, I'm talking to you. Thanks for changing that. And as always, stay safe out there. True TT.